Today's guest made the leap from a Team USA gold medal to full-time as a San Juan River guide, dialing in size 26 midges, navigating 40 fish days, and teaching anglers how to hook into 20-inch browns on 6X tippet. By the end of this episode, you'll learn how to fish the San Juan's glassy tailouts, why ant falls trigger some of the river's best dry fly action, and what it really takes to catch fish all year long on one of America's most technical tailwaters. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back the fish species we all love. Drew Bone of Bone Fly Fishing breaks down the river he knows best, why presentation always beats pattern, how a confidence fly can change everything, and what winning gold in Bosnia taught him about fishing the slow, deep waters of the San Juan. He's fished under the greatest pressure in the World Championships and now brings that same precision to every trip in Northwest New Mexico. Here he is. You can find him at boneflyfishing.com. How you doing, Drew?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on here, and we're looking forward to this episode. We have, the San Juan is, a famous river. It's a river that I'm hoping to get to in the next year. That's one of my big goals, so I'm hoping that today we can talk a little about that. Along with Team USA, you have some serious experience. I think you were part of some of the big teams there that had some championships, so we're going to dig into that and maybe talk about, how to prepare for a new stream. But before we get into all that, take us back to fly fishing. I always love to start kind of from the beginning. I've heard that you got started young. How did you first get into it?
Yeah, so both my parents, they always did it to an extent. It was kind of something that they'd do a few times a year in the summer when we go camping. And being in New Mexico, we go camping a lot in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. So there's always somewhere to go fishing for trout. And so the first time I ever fly fished for trout was when I was 2 years old, and so can't even remember the first time I did it. So I had a really really early start. And then as I got older, I just had a lot more interest in it and became a lot more passionate about it. And eventually that led me to my competitive career.
Yeah, and the competitive career led to eventually a world championship, right?
It did. I fished in two world championships. I fished in my first world championship in Italy in 2022, and I fished my second world championship in Bosnia in 2023, and that's the one that I took individual gold in, and we were also able to secure the team gold medal.
Right. Awesome. Well, I think we're going to definitely touch base on that today and all the details there. But take us back, maybe so 2 years old. So eventually, I guess maybe the next question would be, what is your first memory, of fly fishing after that?
Yeah, I think there's a few like stocked kids ponds kind of in northern New Mexico that I remember going to, and there's a few vivid memories of when my dad would cast the fly rod out for me into the pond, and I'd feel a stock trout, taking all the line out. And I don't know, those are kind of some of the early memories that just kind of hooked me on it and really started that passion for me, because I can't remember the very, very first few times I did it, but I do remember as I got a little bit older, some of those really early memories that kind of started that passion for me that led me down this path.
Yeah. How did the Team USA, when did that idea begin?
I've always been a super competitive person, and so I kind of found out about it because I was like, I wonder if there's a way that I can fly fish competitively. And through some research, I found that there was a U.S. youth fly fishing team, and I think I was about 13 when I found out about that. And as soon as I found out about it, I knew I was like, all right, this is something I want to do, and this is something I want to pursue. And I eventually want to fish on a world championship team, and so I got involved with some of the team events pretty early on, and then COVID kind of put a stop in that for a little bit. And then right when everything kind of got fired back up with the team, I was able to become a member of the team after fishing my first world or my first national championship. And then got to spend a lot of time fishing various competitions on the East Coast that kind of led to me also becoming a team member. And then was really really excited to be part of that first world championship team, because there's about 15 kids on the team, and they only sent
Hmm.
6 members from each team to represent the world championship each year. And so I was actually able to become a team member and a world championship team member at my my first world or at my first national championship, which was held out of North Carolina.
Okay, and what year was that?
That was, I think, the world champ or that national championship is in 2021, and then we fished that first world championship in the following summer, and that's the one that was in Italy.
Oh, in Italy. Okay. And does it feel like when you look back at that that there was a lot of in the right place at the right time sort of thing? Or I'm sure you worked your butt off, but what did all that look like? Were you as you look
Yeah,
back?
like
Yeah.
I think there's certain times when I got to be in the right place at the right time and got to fish in front of the right people at the right time that, I was able to kind of showcase my abilities to, but there was also a lot of extensive work that went into being able to put myself in those positions and be able to perform at the level I needed to. And those years leading up and then even during the peak of my competitive career, I was probably fishing 250 days a year. So there's a lot of work that went into making that all happen and making that a reality.
And so 2023, the gold, and I'm guessing you were around 18 by then and ready, or 17, 18, so you had to head out. You're finished with the youth.
Yeah, you can fish on the youth team until you're 19, and or as long as you're 19 in the same year that world championship took place. So when I won, I had already turned 20, but because I was 19 at some point in that year, I was still eligible for that last one that year.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so
Yep.
you win that, and then next steps. I mean, are you still? Did you think about the next level of Team USA, or did you just think like, man, I just want to get rolling on the guiding?
Yeah, there's definitely some time I spent considering pursuing the men's team, but I really, really enjoyed my years on the youth team, and as I got towards the tail end of my competitive career, I had already started my guiding career on the San Juan, and then as that just became busier, that kind of became the main focus point for me. And so, maybe later on the road, I'll start getting back into the competitive scene, but for now I'm kind of focusing all my time and effort on my business and my guiding career on the San Juan right now.
Nice. That's awesome. And so you've got the San Juan, and do you know, I guess the kids that are, in there now, the youth that are in there now, it's 25, right? So you probably know some of the kids, or is there a lot of turnaround?
I know some of them. Some of them are new that I never really was involved with, but because some of the kids that I fished those last world championships with were a few years younger than me, they're still eligible to fish the world championship last year and this year. And so I would say there's probably about half of that world championship team that I still keep in touch with and that I'm still pretty close with and have also had experience fishing with. So it's a little bit of a mix now, a few years later.
Yeah. Well, knowing what you know, and the cool thing is this year it's in eastern Idaho, right, in the Henry's Fork, and
It
it's on our
is.
home water. Do you think they have from what you know, a chance to take the gold, maybe?
I think no matter where it's at, I think they have a chance to take the gold. We won the world championship that I was a part of in Bosnia. We also that year we in 23, one of my teammates also took the individual silver, and we had someone take individual fourth. So we just missed that third place. And then last year they were I believe they're in the Czech Republic, and they also won the team gold, and they had the clean sweep on the individual podium with first, second, and third. So
Wow.
the last couple years, the Team USA has really kind of dominated all the other teams at the World Championship. So I think that having that home field advantage is only gonna
Make it better.
gonna make that better for them. So
Yeah.
I think that no matter where it's at, I think the team is just so dominant right now that I think that they have a really really good shot at taking another gold medal.
What do you think? What do you attribute that when you look at the dominate? I mean, I guess I didn't want to say the last one because I was talking to. I've had Josh Miller on, and we had Jess on, and we were talking about some of this. And
Right.
I didn't want to say dynasty, but three in a row. The three-peat. Like, what do you
Yeah.
attribute that to? Like, where you guys are at?
At least I think that to win a world championship as a team, you really have to have a team medal mentality. And it has to be, I think that there's been other teams where everyone was, there might be other teams or other years where people might be out for themselves a little bit more and out for that individual medal. But I think to really dominate a world championship, you have to have a team medal mentality, and you have to be wanting your teammates to be as successful as you want yourself to be successful. And so, if everyone's really working together and everyone really has a good team dynamic and all in on that mentality where it's a team medal goal, if that's the mentality, those individual medals are just naturally going to follow. Like if you're all helping each other out and we're all being successful, like we're inevitably going to take those individual medals along with the team medal. So I think to be successful as a team and individually, the team medal mindset is really, really crucial to being successful.
Yeah, it is. Okay. And we've heard that before. That's awesome. I'm not sure where that started or who the Team USA coach was that kind of got that thinking, but we've heard about it before. I mean, Josh Miller, I'm sure you were, was yeah, he was your coach, right, at the time?
He was, yeah. He actually at that world championship I won, he stayed on the lake session the whole time because no one's allowed to talk to the anglers except for each team's coach. And so he kind of stayed on that lake venue the entire course of the world championship and was just watching it every day. He was really, really dialed into what was going on out there. And I fished the lake session on the final day, and it was a really tough session by the end. It was only taking one or two fish to win a session. And
Hmm.
so Josh was actually he actually stood right next to me when I caught my winning fish for that world championship.
Wow. How did that feel when you take that championship, the gold? Like, what's describe that a little bit, that moment?
It was incredible, and I going into the session, I knew it was only gonna because of where I was at. If I caught one fish in that 3 hour session, that was gonna be enough to take the gold. And I actually hooked and lost my first fish, so that was pretty heartbreaking. You could kind of feel the silence of everyone around me watching, and then I was able to get a second chance at another fish and landed that fish and gave Josh a big hug. And it just, he kind of knew that I had it in the bag at that point, even though there's another hour in the session left. And so that was, you know, from the very beginning of my competitive career, winning a world championship was like the pinnacle for me. And that was like the big goal involved in this whole deal, taking a team goal and an individual gold. And so making that happen at my last world championship that I was eligible for was just super surreal, really, really incredible experience. And it was really awesome to have Josh standing by my side when I was able to make that all happen at the end.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, we'll probably talk a little more about this as we go. And, I wanted to talk a little about your home water, what you're doing with the guiding, and maybe talk about how to apply. Somebody's listening now and they're thinking about going to a new water. I think a lot of people are out there always thinking, okay, I go to a new water. How do I prepare? How do I plan? So maybe we could talk about that a little bit. But first, describe the San Juan. We've talked about it a little bit, but haven't done the deep dive. Why would they love to go to the San Juan River?
So the San Juan River is famous for big fish, and lots of big fish. I've gone to travel all over the world, and I've fished so many places all over the country, and I've never fished a river that has the number of fish and the number of big fish, number of fish that are over 18 to 20 inches. Like that's a very, very common fish in the San Juan, and there's not many rivers when that's a can be an average sized fish on some days. And so that number of fish and number of big fish is kind of what it's famous for.
And what is the technique wise? Are you using a lot of the stuff you learned in the World Championships that you're applying for the San Juan?
A little bit, there's a lot of very slow water we fish, and it's a lot of, so there's certain places that Euro nymphing style fishing can be conducive, but there's a lot of water that style of fishing is really not conducive to. And so we do a lot of indicator nymphing, and the bugs in there are very, very small. And so like the last month I haven't fished a fly bigger than a size 22.
Hmm.
Recently we just had it's pretty famous for its antfall every year, so there's a lot of big sandstone cliffs surrounding the river, and there's these big size 12 flying ants that live up in the cliffs. And so after the first big rainstorm of the year, they all get washed into the system, and the fish just absolutely go crazy for them. I think they like have a little bit of poison in them that the fish get addicted to when they start eating them. So once they start eating them, it's just nuts. Like every time you see a fish rising, if you throw something about a size 12, if it's floating and it's black, the fish are going to eat it every time.
Hmm.
It's some of the most incredible dry fly fishing. So with the exception of some of those days out there, it's a lot of midge and batis. You know, we fish a lot of size 22 all the way down to size 28 sometimes, and so it's really hard to fish weighted beadhead flies that are size 26, you know. So that's kind of a time when you have to fish really small unweighted flies with split shot under a strike indicator.
Hmm.
And so it's a little bit different than normal rivers. You don't have as many big bugs and big beadhead flies, and
Yeah.
you know, you don't it's not a typical river at all.
Sounds like it's pretty technical, would you say, overall, at least throughout the year?
It is. It is. I think that for someone that's never been there, showing up there for the first time, you know, even if they have extensive background in fishing a lot of traditional trout rivers, that the San Juan can kind of throw them off and can be come across as really technical. But you know, when you're spend every day out there and you're really dialed in, it's not. It's a really great place to take people that have never fly fished before. You know, have never had someone not catch a fish, and so it's there's a lot of opportunities to catch fish. You know, you just got to give them what they want.
Experience the waters of Bristol Bay at Togiak River Lodge, where fly fishing meets Alaska's rugged beauty. This is the place to complete the Alaska Grand Slam with all 5 salmon species, rainbow trout, Arctic char, and more, where each day offers a new Alaskan adventure. You can visit togiaklodge.com right now to start planning your Bristol Bay experience with Togiak River Lodge. Do you think when you get that, you're using size 22s there, is that mainly because the bugs are just smaller or because there's a lot of pressure and you have to kind of get smaller
The
down?
bugs are so small.
Yeah.
The bugs are so small. And there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of private angler pressure, and there's a lot of guiding pressure. It's a really heavily guided river, but you know, if you're dialed in and giving them what they want,
Yeah.
fish numbers are very high. It's not a low number fishery at all. You know, it's not uncommon to go out there and catch 40, 50 fish a
Hmm.
day. And with a lot of those fish being over 16 to 18 inches. And so
Wow.
it's a really, really incredible fishery.
And so the poison ant, that's really interesting. It sounds like that's dependent on rainfall, but when is that
It
typically?
is. You know, it kind of it happened about a week and a half ago this year, which is kind of early. It usually happens late June and early July.
Okay.
And we might, because it happened so early this year, we might get it to happen again this year
Yep.
if we get a good rain. But it has to rain really, really hard to flush all those ants into the system. And then that next day after that happens is usually a pretty incredible day of dry fly fishing.
Are you guys fishing year round out there?
I am, yep. You know, we're fishing right below the dam, and so the water temperature stays around 42 to 43 degrees year round, no matter how hot or cold it is outside. And being in northwest New Mexico, you know, we're less than 6,000 feet of elevation, so it's kind of high desert country, and so we're not too low, and we're not too high up in the mountains, so the summers aren't terribly hot, and the winters aren't too cold that you can't be out there and fish pretty comfortably if you dress for it. And so the fishing in the wintertime is just as great as the summertime, and because it's so consistent, there's always great bug hatches year round, and the fish are always super happy down there.
Right on. And so you got the midget, and you talked about the small flies. Maybe let's take it there a little bit and talk about this setup if you're using some of those 22s or smaller. Talk about your rig. How do you fish that?
Yeah, so I mean, with an indicator rig, which is most of our fishing, I fish, you know, fishing that light, or fishing flies that small. We throw, you know, especially when fish are high up in the water column or fishing a lot of shallow water, fishing really light, and I really like to throw really thin leader, and so usually the thickest part of my leader is 10-pound maximum, and that'll go all the way down to 4x tippet. And you know, just to avoid twists and tangles, that leader always terminates in a micro swivel, and then that my split shot goes above that swivel, and then I usually fish about 14 inches between each fly, and I tie each fly eye to eye, and so you know we're fishing about a anywhere from a 10 to 12 foot leader, and there's a lot of deep water we fish too, so we might be fishing size 24 flies 7 feet down. And so it really varies. There's a really wide variety of water type from, really just big, deep, slow, almost kind of still water runs to
Hmm.
a lot of shallow riffles. And so the water type that we're fishing varies so much, but the bugs stayed the same. And so,
Hmm.
it just kind of varies on the water type you're in. But yeah, really always just throw a really long, thin leader and then flies about 14 inches apart. So it's nothing too crazy, it's
Yeah.
kind of a standard nymph rig, but everything's kind of refined down. You're not throwing big tapered leaders and
Right.
big flies and big shot. It's kind of the same concept that you would use with a traditional nymph rig, but everything's just a little bit thinner, a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, and just kind of refined down a little bit. And with our flies being so small, I throw a lot. I don't really fish rods shorter than 10 feet. And, even if we're catching 2 foot fish, we're still going to throw like a 10-foot 3 weight or a 10-foot 4 weight. And the reason behind that is, when our flies are that small and our tippets, 6X tippet, and you have fish that big, you kind of need that extra length on that light rod just to have that extra cushion and give. Like a 9-foot 5 weight's going to kind of be like a broomstick, and
Yeah.
you have a 2 foot fish run on a size 24 midge. That hook is either going to pop out or break off. So we use that extra length and that light rod to just have that cushion to kind of protect those small flies and small tippet.
So 10 foot. What would be the longest rod you might use?
Maybe an 11-foot rod. I
Yeah.
kind of like that. I find that 10-foot 4 weight to kind of be the just the bread and butter, the
Yeah.
most
10 foot
versatile
forward.
rod out there. Throws dry flies really well. It's really great for the nymph rigs we throw. If we do throw some heavier weight and some longer rigs, it has enough backbone to turn over those big rigs. Because while a lot of our fishing is with really, really small flies, sometimes you go down there with a size 8 or size 10 leech, and they'll crush a leech too. There's a lot of the bottom of the river is really lush, and we have a lot of moss down there, and there's a lot of bugs in the moss. So sometimes those fish will grab those moss clumps and shake the bugs out
Hmm.
of them. And so throwing a big leech can kind of imitate those moss clumps. And so sometimes those fish will just eat a big giant leech, or in the wintertime they'll eat a big egg as well,
Mm.
or some really, really small worms as well.
Yeah. And are these mix of browns and rainbows?
It is, yeah. It used to be almost all rainbows, but the last decade it's I would say it's probably 60% rainbows and 40% browns.
Okay.
So a little bit heavier rainbows, but still a pretty good mixture.
Yeah. And what is your typical length of a typical indicator rig on your leader?
From my split shot to my indicator, it can be anywhere from 3 feet to 7 feet to that split shot. And then there's sometimes that fish are eating a lot of emerging midges and betas just under the surface, and we might throw one of those small pulse pinch on indicators and have a number 9 split shot 6 inches under our indicator. And all that's going to do is just break the surface so that we can fish those flies just in those top couple inches of the water column. Sometimes even if you're a foot and a half down, you're below where those fish are feeding. So sometimes like sounds kind of goofy and it's not something you'd do on most trout rivers, but we'll throw a really small piece of lead under a really, really small indicator, and that distance might only be 4 to 6 inches, and then it just breaks the surface just so that we can fish in that, kind of top 3 to 6 inches of the water column.
I see. Okay, so and there is some variation. I guess that's the question. If you're fishing it, sounds like the water might be shallow in some areas, but how are you figuring out what depth to get to the fish?
You know, it really depends on the water depth we're in. And in that shallower water, the water's clear enough that with the fish being that big, you can see them all down there. When the water's clear this time of year, you can look down there and the whole river just looks like an aquarium with big fish swimming
Hmm.
all over the place. And so it's really easy to just kind of look down in the river off the boat and see how deep those fish are, how deep the water is, and then you can kind of tailor your rig to that.
Wow. So a lot of the year you can actually see, you're seeing the fish, you're spotting them, you're fishing to specific fish. Is that kind of how it looks?
I mean, there's so many that you're not always fishing to one individual fish. Like you might look down and there's 25 fish in a pod down there and they're 4 feet down. And so then you throw a 4 foot rig at that pod of fish and catch those fish until you're done with them. But it's not uncommon to see browns 28 to 30 inches in the river too. And usually those fish kind of roll solo. And so if we're going to sight fish to one of those fish, we're really trying to dial in our rig to the exact depth and weight, and we'll fish to that individual fish sometimes. But the majority of the time, we're fishing to pretty good sized pods of fish, and whether it be big, deep, slow water or 2 foot riffles, and the fish will sit in all of it. So,
Hmm.
so everywhere you look, there's fish in the river.
And to get down to those on the deeper runs, are you fishing those differently, or is it the same, just getting deeper down?
It kind of varies. Like if we're fishing, some water's so slow that it almost looks like a lake out there. And so you don't need a whole lot of weight because the water's not moving so fast that you need to get down to them instantly. And you can throw a really light, long rig with a really small piece of shot, even if you're 6 feet down, and you can really kind of let it sink down there nice and slow. And then there's some deep water that's really heavy and has a lot of current to it. And, we might throw some really, really heavy lead to get down to those fish. And so it really just depends on the speed of the water. That faster water is going to need more weight than the slower water will.
Okay. And just wrapping up the on the rig on that for a second. So you said you start with the 10 pound. Is that just a short section, or is that how long is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so my leader formula for a nymph rig starts with 3 feet of 10-pound maxima, and then goes to 3 feet of 8-pound maxima, and then that ends in 3 feet of 4x tippet, and then I'll either end in a tippet ring or a micro swivel.
Okay. Microswim. I got you. And then you said you tie your flies on to the hook eye. So each and what is the reason for that versus say other dropper methods?
Yeah, so if I'm fishing weighted flies like we do when we're Euro nymphing, I always throw everything off a short dropper tag like most people do. But with those flies being unweighted and that small, I kind of feel like they're a little bit more prone to tangling up when they're that small and unweighted if you tie them off a dropper tag.
Mm.
And because the hooks are so small, I don't really like to tie off the bend just to keep that whole hook gap a little bit more open. So I tie everything eye to eye. And then I always tie all my flies on with a Davy knot, and that Davy knot's just such a small knot, and it doesn't have a lot of wraps in it. And so when you have a size 28 fly, if you tie 2 clinch knots off the eye, those knots are going to be as big as the fly you're fishing. And so,
Yeah.
so that Davy knot's just such a small, refined knot that it doesn't. There's not a lot of bulk to that knot. And so I really, really love fishing that knot with those small flies, or really any of my flies for that matter.
Okay. No, that's awesome. I've heard a lot about the Davy knot. I actually haven't. I should probably practice that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it pretty easy to learn?
It's super easy to learn, and
Yeah.
and it doesn't it wastes very little tippet. If you get good enough at tying it, you can tie it on without even having to clip your tags off, just because you can cinch it down with that tag being so short. And I find it to be a stronger knot, and it doesn't have a lot, like when you tie a clinch knot, there's all those wraps around it. So when you cinch it down, I find that it burns your knot just a little bit, and it kind of compromises your tippet strength. But that Davy knot has so minimal wraps that when you cinch it down, there's no friction on the knot, and so it doesn't compromise your tippet strength either.
Nice. That is a huge one. Yeah. And then is that Davy Watton? Do you know? Is that who
It
that?
is. It
Yeah.
is the Davy one. Yep.
Yeah, Davy Watton. That's right. Do you know Davy? I'm guessing you met a few of those big names, old timers over the years.
Yeah, I've met quite a few of them. I never met Davy though.
Yeah.
One of my big mentors, Norman McTima.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's a big Team USA guy, and
Sure.
he's also based out of New Mexico, and recently he's also been guiding a little bit on the San Juan, and he learned that one from Davey himself, and passed that one down to me a few years back.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Yeah,
Yep.
we had let's see, I think it was episode 348. We had Norman on, and we talked
Oh,
about
nice.
yeah. So it was a little bit ago. I guess that's been 22, but yeah, no, awesome. I think we've been working around connecting with a lot of the Team USA stuff. So this is great. So you've got we talked about your rig. Talk about the time of year, like throughout the year. Do you like if somebody's listening now and they're thinking, maybe they're nearby but they haven't fished the San Juan? Is there a better time or worse time to go to fish it?
There's never a bad time to be on the San Juan.
Yeah, it's always good.
Never a bad day out there. It's always good. The bug choice and the fly selection and the water type that you fish can change based on the time of year. Right now we're fishing mostly bugs, size 22 and smaller, all midges and betas. But you show up in the middle of January and you're not gonna catch very many fish throwing size 22 midges and betas. And that time of year, you know, just a red larva is gonna be a really good choice. An egg pattern is gonna be a really good choice, and a leech is gonna be a really good choice. So that time of year, it's you're fishing a little bit brighter and bigger, kind of standard wintertime flies. And so a lot of your standard wintertime trout flies that you'd fish on a lot of rivers will actually work really well in the San Juan as well that time of year.
Okay. And why do the leeches work well during the wintertime?
There's the bug. While there are still great bug hatches, during that time of year, those fish just really like those bigger junk flies and those bigger, brighter patterns. And in the wintertime, the water is a little bit more off colored. And so you can just get away with throwing those bigger flies, a little bit heavier tippet. Whereas this time of year, you might show up out there first thing early in the morning when the light's low and catch some fish on a leech or an egg. But for the most part, with the water being this clear, you gotta kind of refine everything down and go with a little bit of a more technical approach with those smaller flies and that lighter tippet.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So June, so right now as we're talking, it's kind of early mid-June and you're hitting the smaller stuff. And then what happens as you go into the summer, into the hotter parts of the season? What changes with the hatches? Do you guys have a little bit of everything there with hatches?
It is, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. So, but our flies and our tippet size will probably drop a little bit, once we get into later July and August, just because that water is going to get more clear. Those fish are going to get a little bit more technical as they get more pressured throughout the summer. And so you just go kind of refine everything down just even slightly more. Once we get later in the summer, there can be some great opportunities for hopper fishing as well. So we can, while our nymphs are really small, sometimes you can go out there with a big giant dry fly and catch plenty of fish doing that as well. And so um, once we get even probably starting about now through the rest of the summer, that hopper fishing is gonna be something that can be successful as well.
Yeah, and that changes all up when you got a big hopper on there. You're going bigger with everything. And is it just talk about that a little bit, or what are you doing to get those fish to eat the hoppers?
I find that when I'm throwing hoppers, I've got to really target the shallow water. I don't find very many fish in the big, deep pools coming from 7 feet of water to eat a hopper. But, when you're fishing water that's 4 feet on the deep end, all the way down to a foot deep, those fish are going to be the fish that are usually willing to come up and eat something big off the top.
Okay. And are you on the dry fly with those hoppers? Are you just casting any specific way against the bank? Are you doing any movement, anything like that?
There are a lot of fish against the bank, and then sometimes there's just some big shallow riffles where you can see pods of fish out there that are sometimes at the right time of the year pretty happy to just come up and crush a big dry fly too. And then, once we get a little bit higher flows in the river as the summer goes on, when they release some more water out of the dam, there's also a lower river float will fish. So the water that we've kind of been talking about is the what's considered the quality waters, and that's all catch and release and really strictly regulated, and that's the first 4 miles below the dam. Then there's about a 9 mile float we do that's all through private water, and that's what kind of everyone refers to as the lower river.
Mm.
And being down that low below the dam, it fishes a little bit more like a traditional freestone, and that's kind of the water that I was talking about that is a lot more conducive to tightline fishing. You'll get them to eat a size 14 beadhead with no problem. There's a lot of overhanging brush on the river that you can throw hoppers against when the water comes up a little bit higher. We'll throw a lot of traditional dry droppers with a big hopper and, just a size 14 or size 16 beadhead nymph a few feet below that. And so once you go down there, you don't have to throw as much of the super small technical stuff. And there's a lot of brown trout down there, and those fish don't see as much pressure. And that kind of fish is more like a traditional trout river. But when everyone comes to the San Juan, the quality waters in that first 4 miles of the dam is what the river's famous for, and
Oh, it
that's
is.
kind of where everyone wants to go, and that's where there's the highest number of fish in the river, and that's where there's the most big fish. On the lower river, there's a lot of fish. There's still a lot of great opportunities at some big fish, but you don't see the number of those 20 plus inch fish. It's kind of if you catch a couple fish that big in one day, that's great. And you'll catch a lot of 16 and 17 inch browns down there. So there's still great fish, but
Yeah.
you don't see as many of those 20 plus inch fish as you do in that first 4 miles below the dam.
And is that just because the water is cooler throughout the year, or any reason why?
Yeah, the water temperature might late in the summer be a slightly warmer down there, but it really doesn't change a whole lot. And I think that, being all catch and release and strictly regulated up there, it's also stocked a little bit heavier with those rainbows. And so,
Hmm.
it has more fish in it, and those big fish have a lot more small fish to eat because they stock all the rainbows as fingerlings. So they're really small fish when they stock them. And, a lot of those big fish will kind of go crazy for those little fish. And once they get big enough to start eating other fish, they grow really fast.
Which is in the 20-inch range. They start feeding on other
Yeah,
fish. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think that even I've seen 16, 18-inch fish eat other small fish without a problem too. So once they start getting to that size, they tend to grow pretty fast.
Cool. So that breaks it down. Then is it roughly there's about 13 miles of river that people are fishing. Then below that, it's not quite worth the time.
Yeah, so there's that first 4 miles below the dam, and then in between the lower river float and the quality waters, there's about 3 miles that there's a lot more relaxed tackle restrictions. It's stocked a little bit more heavily, and people are allowed to keep fishing there, and that's still all public. And so there's still some big fish in there, but that gets gets fished pretty hard by people that, are throwing fish on a stringer. But once you get below that 3 miles, that's where it's all private land. There's very minimal fishing pressure. There's a lot less boat traffic, and that's kind of that 9 mile float is the lower river float. So we have about 15 miles of floatable river.
Okay. Nice. And are you guys floating in drift boats or rafts?
We're all in drift boats. Yeah, there's not any crazy rapids or anything that you need a raft for. So it's pretty standard that everyone's in a low profile boat, or
Yep.
most people are in skiff style drift boats, just because you don't need a high side on your boat in the San Juan, and
Yep.
that skiff is just a lot easier to row, and it doesn't get blown around in the wind as bad.
Do you think you need a bush plane to fish Alaska's legendary waters? Think again. FishHound Expeditions specializes in road accessible adventures that don't skip on excitement. Picture yourself fishing for massive rainbow trout, Arctic grayling, and plenty of salmon species all within Alaska's epic road system. It's doable. I fished the road system on our first day with Adam and the crew, and it did not disappoint. The largest leopard rainbow I caught and landed was right off the road system. And we'll be driving up again this year, heading up from the lower 48 all the way up to Alaska to hit those streams again. You'll experience the breathtaking beauty of Alaska's wilderness, from mountain streams to hidden rivers, perfect for anglers of all levels. FishHound Expeditions makes it easy to explore Alaska. Why wait? Your Alaska adventure is just a drive away. Book your spot now before spaces fill up. That's fishhoundexpeditions.com. FishHound expeditions.com. Don't miss out. Well, let's take it to, maybe more higher level, kind of think of a new river. So if somebody's listening now and they might be fishing the San Juan or really any other river, what would you tell them as they prepare us? I'm guessing you've done quite a bit of this through your Team USA stuff, but, how do you prepare? What sort of tips might you give somebody for that?
If I was preparing for the San Juan,
Yeah, well, maybe even take it to, let's just say you're preparing for a river that you haven't fished before.
yeah, so like I think a good example would be, preparing for a world championship,
Yeah.
because that we're going to new places that we've never been, new
Yep.
rivers that we've never fished. And so for the months and months leading up to a world championship, the team hires a local guide. And for those months leading up to the world championship, we stay in really good contact with him, and he's always giving us kind of the up-to-date intel and giving us all the local knowledge that we have. And we're just kind of doing as much online research on the rivers that we can find. And so based on that knowledge that we're gaining, we'll kind of prepare our fly patterns and kind of try our best to prepare for the water that we're going to be fishing. And then when we show up there, we get about a week of practice fishing, so we can kind of take that knowledge and information and apply it to our practice fishing. We can, try our own stuff that we're really confident in, and kind of come up with a game plan for how we're gonna approach that river through those competition days. And so, that's kind
Yeah,
of breaks down how I'd prepare for
right.
a new river.
So you start off with, which is great, pay a local guide. I think that's always something that we talk a lot about, even if it's just for one day, right? Getting that experience. Yeah. And then you mentioned the online research. What do you think is the best online research? I mean, you could obviously Google it, but do you think that's sufficient? Just Google up the river, the technique. How would you,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. What would you do?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of places in the US where are famous rivers like the San Juan, or a lot of the big famous rivers in Montana, or just any of your big famous rivers in the US have a lot of online resources that you can come across and apply to what you're doing and where you're fishing. But some of those places in Europe have kind of minimal online resources, so
Right.
we're kind of trying to just do our best, trying to look at pictures of the river, look at videos of the river, trying to get an idea of what the bug hatches are like there, and that'll kind of help us figure out, how we want to tie our flies leading up to that competition, and try and get an idea of how we're going to approach that. And then when we show up there, we'll see, how much of that really helped us. And, we kind of go into it with an open mind of kind of trying everything. And then when we show up with a big team, everyone's trying different stuff. And we kind of, by the end of that practice week, we can kind of combine all our information and our knowledge and research from that week along with the information we had prior to going over there. And so we kind of combine all that to come up with the best game plan that we can.
Right. And that practice week, so that's where you guys would, you do all your research, then you get over there a week before, so you have a week to practice before the event starts.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So the guide will take us to all the local practice spots, put us on as much different water as we can. We're not allowed to fish the competition venues leading up to the competition, but we can, go look at the venues, look at what the water looks like, and compare that to the practice water that we were able to fish earlier that week. In 2022, when we fished the World Championship in Italy, we actually went over there a few months early. So the World Championship took place in July, and I think we went over there in either March or April
Hmm.
for just a practice trip. And because we fished it far enough in advance, we were able to fish all the competition venues. And so, there's some water that I fished in March or April during our practice trip that I had in the competition. So
Hmm.
I already had some familiarity with the water that I was competing on, and had that local knowledge. So there's definitely a lot of confidence going into that world championship, just because
Mm-hmm.
we had already spent that time out there, and
Hmm.
kind of got familiar with the water and familiar with the fish and the bug activity and everything that was going on out there.
Right. What as the youth that are there this year, it's going to be actually it's right around the corner, July. Actually, by the time this episode goes out, I think it'll already be over. But as you look ahead, they're obviously doing it every year, doing these events. What would be your tip to the youth, the kids that are out there now to have more success, or what would you tell them from your experience, what you know?
As far as just trying to get to that level where you can compete with those people, I would just fish as much as you can and fish on as much different water as you can. I would if you have any places that are really difficult to fish, I would always go fish those places, just because they would always make you better, and fish with as many other people as you can, and just try and just always go into everything with an open mindset, and just always show up to the river without having any preconceived notions going into everything, and know that every day on the river is a new day, and just work on as many styles of fishing as you can, because once you get to that level in the world championship, while there's a lot of that European style nymphing, and while that is really important to be able to do that well, you also got to be able to fish a dry fly just as well as you can nymph, and fish a streamer just as well as you can nymph, and fish a lake,
Yeah.
because when you go to a world championship, they're going to put you on a lot of different types of water, and there's going to be some water that you can't nymph very well, and you have to throw dry flies. You're also going to have to fish lakes, and so there's just a wide variety of skill sets that you gotta have in your tool bag, and you got to do all of them really well to compete at that level. And so just try and really um, test all your skill sets, and work on everything that you can, because if you're really good at one thing, that might be good on one day, but then you show up to your session the next day, and if you don't nymph it very well, and you don't know how to fish a dry fly very well, that's gonna be kind of
Yeah, it's gonna be
difficult.
tough.
So just try and work on as many different things as you can, and fish as much as you can, and fish as much variety of water as you can.
Yeah, the variety, right? So not just the riffles, but you try to hit it all different
You
water
got to
types.
fish it all. You got
Yeah.
to know how to fish all water types and fish all those water types with all different styles.
Nice. Well, we're going to take it out of here in a little bit as we go here. But you mentioned lakes. Is that something down on in the San Juan that you're fishing a lot of out there? Or is it mostly streams?
It's mostly so around the lake that the San Juan is coming out of. It does have trout in it, but it's more of a smallmouth bass and pike fishery.
Mm,
So we don't do as much of that style of lake fishing, but we go just north of the border, about an hour and a half away, and there's a lot of really, really great trout fishing lakes up in the mountains that I would spend a lot of time practicing on in my competition years, and so, knowing how to fish a lake well from the bank or out of the boat, throwing all the different sinking lines and all the different flies and all the different styles that you'd use to fish a lake is really, really important to the competition game.
perfect. Well, I've got a few more, and then we'll let you get out of here. And I want to kick it off here just with our kind of a wet fly swing pro segment. And this is where we're kind of giving a shout out to our community in here, and we're in there always thinking of new places to go and getting the tools and things like that. So people can go out to wetflyswing.com/pro if they want to get some more information there. But talk about, as we take it out of here, your fly box. What's your fly box setup look like as you're preparing for your river, or maybe just talk about your box there in the San Juan? Are you a bunch of boxes, or how is your organization method set up?
I have a bunch of boxes. My main box is just a magnetic fly box, just because those flies that we fish on the San Juan are so small.
Yeah.
And it's organized by style, fly, and color a little bit, but there's probably 4,000 flies just all piled in there, and so I
Yeah.
don't have the most organized box. But as far as my competition boxes, my Uranus boxes, I always had those very organized and organized by weight on the flies and fly size and fly type. And I used to fish a lot of flies, but as I competed more, I kind of went to a more simple approach where I think the whole world championship I fished out of one fly box.
Hmm.
And most trout are not too picky, and I always was big on just fishing my confidence flies and making them work and not worrying about having 40 different fly patterns. And instead, maybe that whole world championship I fished 6 different fly patterns the whole
Oh
time.
wow.
If that, I was
Right.
probably like 3 or 4 different nymphs I fished the whole time. And
Crazy.
um, you know, I really like the approach of just having a simple selection of flies and not worrying about your fly pattern too much and focusing more on your presentation more than anything.
Right. That's really cool. What were those 6 flies that you used through the World Championships? Was that a mix of
There was
tries and
one that was like kind of a variation of a blowtorch. It was just a big tag nymph, and then there's some Paragon style flies, and then there was also just like some big heavy hare's ears. And in the Bosnia World Championship, we were only allowed to fish one fly, and so we were fishing a lot of big, deep, heavy water, and so we
you
needed
mean
a
one
lot of
fly the
weight.
whole time?
The what? No, you can.
No.
I mean, you could fish different flies, but you're only allowed to fish one fly at a time.
Oh,
So you
gotcha.
couldn't fish like a double nymph rig.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of, we had a big 4 millimeter tungsten bead on that hook with a lot of lead weight hidden in the body underneath all the materials, just because we couldn't fish 2 flies, so that one fly that we were fishing had to have a lot of weight to get down there. So a lot of our flies were pretty big. We fished a lot of size 10 and 12 nymphs, 14 on the small side throughout that world championship. So a little bit different, but for what we were doing over there, it worked really well.
Yeah. So basically a blowtorch variation, Paragon variations, a big hare's ear. And that was it as for the World Championships, or do you have some
Yeah.
dries mixed in there?
Yeah, a lot of dry flies mixed in there too. A lot of just like big CDC caddis dries, and then a big egg pattern was
Oh,
incredible
egg
too.
pattern. Egg pattern for the Worlds.
Yeah. Yeah, I think our that was kind of like the winning fly pattern that we fished. Those nymphs were really productive too, but
Hmm.
I think everyone kind of fished that egg pretty hard throughout that competition.
Really? And is this just what's the egg? What type of pattern is it?
It's just that ecstasy material. So just that egg chenille that we wrap up the hook.
Okay. Yep.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty easy. So you've got the basic patterns, your confidence fly, and then really it's about technique. You're on the water, figuring out how to present the fly essentially to get down to the fish at the right level.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So pretty simple. When you look back at it, do you see that, I mean, it could have gone either way on some of those things, or do you feel like, you kind of had your game ready? I guess I'm going back to the 23 when you took the gold. Were there a few chances that kind of like that it went the right way, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that going into it, I kind of just had a game plan and kind of stuck with that game plan. That game plan was pretty simple, and I didn't wasn't one of those guys that had 4,000 flies in my chest pack and
Right.
had one box that I fished out of, and I was like, I'm gonna fish an egg, a tag, and a hare's ear, and that's what I'm rolling with, and I'm gonna
Yep.
gonna make it work. And I just stuck with that game plan and had 100% confidence in it the whole time, and it worked really, really well for me, obviously, the whole time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like with some species, I always go back to kind of steelhead, for example. You have to have confidence. It doesn't really, the fly isn't as critical as knowing that it's the fly that works or it's a fly that works, right? And so,
Right.
I feel like that's a big part of this, right? Even with trout, is that having confidence in your fly is that critical here?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that, if you have confidence in the fly you're gonna fish, if someone else is throwing the same fly and doesn't have confidence in it, I think you're gonna fish that fly a lot better. Just because you have confidence in it, you're not worried about trying other flies. Your only concern at that point is how you're presenting that fly to the fish and trying to make it work the best you can, and you know that that's the fly you want to be fishing, and you have confidence that it's gonna work for you, and so at that point you're just looking for trout to eat it.
What do you think is a big overlooked kind of skill that competition or just maybe fishing in general, something that that you utilize or some skill you have that a lot of people don't think as much about?
I think for me it's reading water. I
Yeah.
think that that's something that maybe some people don't maybe they can overlook a little bit.
Or not even know how to do it, or not even really know where to start
Not
on it.
know not knowing how to read the water, and
Yeah.
then not knowing how to tailor your presentation to different water types. Because we might fish the same fly, but you might have to fish that fly heavier. You might have to fish it lighter. You might have to fish it deeper, shallower. You might have to fish a different drift in different types of water. And so just knowing how to tailor your presentation to those different water types is something that's really important. And I think there's a lot of water that gets overlooked by people that has a lot of fish to be caught that, a lot of people will walk right past. And so fishing all the water and knowing how to fish all the waters is really, really important. More so than your rig or your fly selection.
Right. And a good, like you said, the good way to do that is potentially get a guide trip or go with somebody who maybe has some of that experience if you don't have it. The reading the water is challenging, right? Because you have the reading the water of like, okay, where are the fish? And then presenting the fly. Are you casting upstream, across, down, right? There's a lot of unknowns. I guess you can experiment. I guess if somebody wasn't going to get a guide trip, what would be your, tip there? Just experiment with techniques.
Just to experiment a lot,
Yeah.
and as a guide, I can take people to a big variety of different water types throughout the day, and I can explain to people why we're going to throw more weight in this spot, why we're going to take off weight in this spot, why our rig needs to be a foot deeper, or why it has to be shallower, or why our fly selection is different in different types of water. Like on the San Juan, we're fishing a lot of riffle water. I throw a lot more betas because the betas live in the riffles. And so it's like just explain why my fly selection, why my presentation, and why my weight and depth changes, why you need to mend a certain way, why you need to cast in a certain spot, and explain the thought process behind all those decisions in those different spots that a lot of people don't think of. And, you know, I see all those things and can explain to people my thought process and my psychology behind all those decisions that I make on the water throughout the day in those different situations.
Perfect. Well, cool. Well, you mentioned boats. I wanted to just touch base on a little gear real quick on the boat. What's your boat that you're using out there? Your skiff?
I'm rowing a Clockcraft headhunter right
Oh yeah,
now.
yeah, the
Yep.
headhunters. So like, what length is that? Is that a 16 footer?
That's about a 15, I think it's about a 15 or 15 and a half foot boat.
Okay. Yeah, good. And
Yeah.
what's it like in the summer? How are you always interested? We've got I've heard the sun is getting stronger out there. How do you stay, safe out there in the sun? What's your because you guys probably, I'm guessing, the summertime it gets pretty hot.
It does. It's, with the water being so cool, if there's a little breeze blowing off the water, it doesn't get too hot where you can't be out there. But as far as sun protection goes, I'm always wearing long sleeves, really lightweight pants and lightweight long sleeve shirts with a hood. And
Yep,
so,
that's
you
it.
know, so the only thing exposed is my hands and my face and my feet. And so
Yep, and
I
your
don't do a
feet.
good job at wearing sunscreen, but I should probably do better about that.
Are you wearing like sandals out there? What's your boot?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
always wearing flip
Oh, there
flops.
you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, that's awesome. We did. I can't remember the name of. We did a trip with Pete Erickson on in the eastern Idaho's a couple years ago. But he had this South African guide who was one of our guides on the trip, and yeah, he was wearing. Actually, he just walked barefoot most of the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but he did have his sandals. But yeah, he was walking barefoot. It was pretty funny. But yeah, I've always been kind of a boot, probably because I'm more of a northern guy, right? It's a little bit colder, but it is nice to have the sandals. So what's your go-to sandal? Is this like a flip-flop or what do you got there?
Yeah, just like a Choco flip flop.
Yeah, Chacos are great. Cool. Nice, Drew. Well, I think, there's always a ton of questions, we could ask, but I think we'll leave it there and we'll send everybody out to boneflyfishing.com if they have questions or bonefly fishing online. And like we said at the start, the World Championships are in eastern Idaho near kind of the Henry's Fork. They're going to be on the South Fork of the Snake. So it's going to be exciting. And hopefully, we'll take home a gold. We'll know by the time this goes live whether they won, I think. So
I know. We'll have to wait and see, huh?
awesome. All right, Drew. Well, appreciate all your time and look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
If you ever been thinking about fishing the San Juan or wanting to know how to catch 20-inch trout, how to get big days, Drew Bones, San Juan is the place for you. You can check in right now with Drew. Go to boneflyfishing.com and check in and ask him any questions you have. And if you're thinking about technical tailwaters, this is the place to go. So check in right now. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast. You'll get the next episode delivered to your inbox. Next week, we're back with CJ's Real Southern Podcast. And CJ always brings it. CJ is always bringing it. All right, I am going to let you get out of here, and we're off to some good stuff today. Hope you have a good morning. Hope you have a great afternoon. And if it's evening, hope you're enjoying that evening, kicking back. And I appreciate you for stopping in today. We'll see you on the next episode.